everybody, and welcome to today's call. Good morning on a Friday in a beautiful sunny Colorado. Just gonna wait for a couple of minutes for you guys to actually see me so we can start recording the whole segment about Candida. I know it can be a serious problem for so many of you. I'm gonna do a quick sound check before that. Can you guys confirm you can hear me okay before I get going? Oh, I see people jumping on. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And yeah, so we're talking about Candida today, and I'm wondering, great. My assistant Lisa says I can hear you. Perfect. I'm always really nervous about these technology stuff. Sometimes it doesn't work. So those of you who are joining in, how many of you know that you have Candida? You suspect you have Candida, which is also known as the yeast overgrowth. And I'm talking here about Candida albicans, which is the most common form of Candida. So, I wanted to do the segment on Candida because so many of you are having a problem with it. In fact, when I used to be in private practice, about 70% of women I work with had some level of Candida. Some was, and I would say about half of the women know that they have it and the other one don't. And can be really misleading. Diagnosis of Candida can be really, really misleading as well. Because it is, first of all, it's really hard to diagnose. And a lot of times it shows a false negative. False negative means that it's showing you that you don't have Candida, and that is false because in reality you do. And we're going to talk about symptoms. So what I want to talk about today is I want to cover symptoms. So in case you think you don't have it, but you're kind of curious, because you think like you might be having something going on. Let me just take a look at comments and see if I can, for some reason, I'm not seeing comments coming in, which is a bummer. Let's see. Okay. That is kind of, can one of you guys make a comment and see whether I'm actually seeing it? So I want to get going with the call. So, but I do want to make sure. Oh yes, hello there, Andrea. So I can see the comments. There were just no comments. That's why I'm no reason to panic. Breathe. All right. So I'm wondering, what would you like to know about Candida? Who here thinks you have Candida, and what would you like to know about it? And that way, I would love to cover it. I usually get symptoms after antibiotics. Am I saying? Hello, Mahmouda. What a great name. Lisa is saying hello. Lisa Tompkin Love. Hola. I recognize that name. So yeah, so I want to talk about symptoms, and many of them you'll be surprised to hear. And even though your labs might be coming back negative, or as I said, false negative, let's talk about treatments. Let's talk about diet changes. Let's talk about diagnosing Candida, like in case you need the proof that that is what you have. And Adriana, hello. Charlene Smith from Texas. I think Charlene is a regular here as well. Welcome. Robin Keith, I recognize their name as well. Hello, Robin. So let's get started with the whole Candida thing. And in case you're joining in, you do need to drop off earlier, then there is going to be a full recording. So Mahmouda is saying I pronounced it so perfectly too. Yeah, I actually grew up in a Muslim country, so I used to have a lot of friends like Soraya and Mahmouda and Shada and all sorts of interesting names like that. So, all right, so let's get started. The first, I just prepared some cliff notes, so let me bring up those. So the first thing I want to talk about is Candida is a yeast overgrowth, and the most common one that we are talking about is Candida albicans, which is the most common form of Candida. And it's a form of a yeast that we all have it. The problem starts when it starts overgrowing so vastly that it becomes out of control and it starts giving you a lot of really weird symptoms. And everyone is a little different. So two people can have Candida. One person might be exhausted, not losing weight. The other person might have white tongue and funny and itchy ears and an itchy butt. A third woman might be having just vaginal discharge. A woman who's lactating might be having Candida on her nipples. So it's just such a variety of different symptoms that it can manifest. So let's talk about that in a second. But in terms of manifestation, the places that Candida shows up most often is in your digestion. That's the starting point. When I say digestion, is anything from the tongue starting off to your stomach, not so much, because if you have acidic stomach, and for those of you who listen to the low stomach acid call, then you know that one of the first ways of preventing Candida is actually to have a pretty good high stomach level, normal levels of stomach acid, and that way the pH2 in the stomach will actually not allow Candida to grow in the stomach. And then you have the small intestine, the large intestine, and that's where Candida actually loves to live when you do not have sufficient probiotics, good bacteria, right, to put it in place and to control its overgrowth. The other one is definitely the skin. So I mentioned nipples, but it can be appearing also on your feet, on your nails. Those are athlete's feet. Those are very common skin appearances. Reproductive organs, especially for us women, like the vaginal discharges. It could also be another one, a bacterial infection that can happen, but which is about 40% of the time. 60% of the time it is due to Candida. And the interesting thing is that, we do things like douches when we advise to do douches when we have Candida yeast overgrowth, and it helps momentarily. But those of you, anyone here has done a douche before, if you're not embarrassed to admit it, I certainly have in the past when I had vaginal discharges, and it helps for like 2 days, and you put all these essential oils in, or garlic, or all sorts of different douches out there. But, when you have Candida in the digestion, it will impact, is a reflection in a vagina. And so it is really kind of futile effort. Like if you don't fix your Candida in the gut, then you're not going to fix it in the vagina. So there you have it. And also, another one is our nipples. And I especially see Candida yeast overgrowth happening in women. Doctors telling me to move on, but I feel not well all the time. Oh, I see. Hold on. So I have a minor case of Candida, Andrea is saying. Does this affect adrenal fatigue? Does it make it worse? I feel weird all of the time, and I've been on adrenal fatigue protocol for a few months now. So let's talk about that in just a second. Candida can really suppress the immune system and vice versa. So let's talk about that in just a second. So let's talk about symptoms next, right? Who here actually knows that you have Candida? Can you just share? And my question earlier was, what would you like to know about Candida from today's call? And then I would be very happy to address it. So, one of the symptoms of Candida, like I said, it's really hard to diagnose Candida, right? And it's kind of killing me because a lot of times women come back and say, my doctor did like a blood test, or we did a stool test from this really expensive lab, and it shows I have no Candida. But this person has vaginal discharge and white coating in the tongue and itchy ears, and she has got sinus blocked up, after having a glass of wine. Those are screaming symptoms that the yeast flares up when you are adding sugar, which alcohol is also sugar, and something is happening in your body. So do not just rely on labs. I'll talk about labs in just a second, but let's just really focus on, mainly on the symptoms today, because it's really important to tune into your body and not ignore those symptoms. It's not just an itchy ear. It's not just white coating on the tongue. It's a sign that something needs to be addressed. Jessica is saying, can you have Candida issues without some of the symptoms you're mentioning? Hold on, Jessica, I haven't mentioned all symptoms, so let me get to it now. So let's get started. General health issues, things like no-brainer, constantly craving sugar. But, so there's a kind of person who can't walk by a bakery without stopping in because that muffin, even though it's gluten-free, looks really, 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 really good, right? But then many of you will say here, oh, I don't really crave sugar, but I just want something sweet at the end of dinner, because dinner is not complete without a piece of chocolate afterwards. And I totally get it, but I'm telling you this now that I've worked with enough women to say that even if you have that sense of incompleteness of dinner, which didn't have any sugar, right, and you need it, then that could be a sign of Candida as well. Another one which is so common is chronic fatigue, but then hey, you can have chronic fatigue due to anything, right? So that's not really a strong sign. Foggy brain could be an issue as well. You know, you just cannot focus. That could also be thyroid, could also be adrenal fatigue. But oftentimes, especially when you have sugar and after the 2-3 hours, you're like kind of spacey and they can't really focus and everything is behind a fog and your attention span is really short, that's a red flag right away. You know, constant just overall body aches and pains. Like you just always have something going on. I have to say though, this could also be due to the gluten, you know, just generally eating sugar, dairy can also be highly inflammatory. So again, it's not a very super strong side, but it could be one of them. But let's talk about women's symptoms. So vaginal discharge, itchiness, stinging, and constant like thrush infections, that's a huge one. But guess what? UTIs, urinary tract infections, can oftentimes be, the UTIs occur when there's an overgrowth of specific bacteria and the pH of the urinary tract is such that it promotes the growth. Interestingly, when there's a direct correlation, with having Candida and UTIs. So again, that's another symptom. Another one we can talk about is digestion. So digestive symptoms would be things like having a lot of bloating all the time. And like no matter what you eat, right? Of course, bloating can also be due to food intolerances, like you eat gluten or you're having corn, you're having sugar, and then boom, right? But also observe, like if you're having something sweet and you have that bloat happening, that's another one. One thing that my doctor taught me, the integrative doctor I used to see in New York, is when you lie down flat and you put one hand on your tummy and then you knock on the hand and it's kind of like a hollow sound, that could be a sign of gas being in there, and oftentimes the gas could be due to Candida. So another one for digestion is if you see white film in the stool, that's a huge giveaway that surely there is Candida going on. On the skin, you have fungal nail infections, athlete's feet, like I mentioned before, but also hives can be connected to having Candida. In a mouth, no brainer, white tongue, you know, so white coating on the tongue. First thing in the morning when you wake up throughout the day, just wouldn't go away. You're scraping it, it's got like a lot of film coming off. That could be a pretty strong indicator of Candida. Not the only one, but it could be one of them. Cracked tongue could be another one. Cracked corners of the mouth, although that could also be vitamin B deficiency. So I'm just giving you like all the symptoms that can be, which ones are a little bit like could be anything, and the other ones which are stronger on Candida. Let's see what else. Respiratory, that's a huge one. So chronic infections and nasal congestion oftentimes is connected to Candida. Here's one exercise I want you to do. Start observing. You're having a glass of wine, and after the glass of wine, do you ever get like stuffy nose, sinus, nose, right? Do you get itchy ears? Like, ooh, can't stop itching. Do you get itchy butt? Anus, that's another sign, a flare-up of Candida. The yeast overgrowth is flaring up, right? And another thing really good to look out for. Let's see, another one which is a huge giveaway, and that's the reason why I'm not a fan of kombucha, is very high in yeast. You see, guys, ferments are not the same. A lot of people go like, oh, I do fermented foods. I drink kombucha all the time, right? Well, kombucha has a very different fermentation profile and the spectrum of probiotics in it versus, for example, sauerkraut versus kimchi versus miso. They all have different bacteria, and so it really is the best thing to combine them all. I am not a fan of kombucha because 70% of women who I know in my circles, and that could possibly be you, are having some form of yeast overgrowth. And what happens then is when you're drinking kombucha, a couple of things can happen. You start burping, you get bloated, some of you are getting dizzy, like a little bit of a drunk feeling, like literally you just like, as if I had two, sips of wine, even though there's like very minimal alcohol. This is all a flare-up of Candida. This is the reason why I'm not a fan of kombucha, and I don't think we should be drinking it. Let's see what else. So those are the symptoms. So how does, am I saying itching can also be histamine, so hard to differentiate? That is true, but if you're having something sweet that is not high in histamine, like for example, a piece of even gluten-free cake, and if you start getting itchy, then it's then it's not histamine. for example, with his, it's pretty easy to differentiate. I mean, cheese, for example, is high in histamine, right? If you're doing a piece of cheese and you're having a reaction, that is not because of Candida, because it's all protein and fat, right? So it's pretty easy to differentiate that way. Okay, let me take a quick look at the questions. Lisa Tompkins Love is asking thought of functional doctor prescription nystatin. I'll talk about it in a second. Thomas KJ is asking colonics help. It does, but here's the thing, Thomas KG. Is it Thomas or is it KG? How do I call you? Is that just doing colonics without making dietary changes, if you have yeast overgrowth in the small intestine, colonics are in the large intestine, then the colonics itself is not going to help. And if you don't change your diet, the Candida is going to continue growing in the small intestine. Courtney is saying, battled yeast infections in UTI since I was a teen, so a naturopath and UTI fixed, but still battle yeast. Now adrenal fatigue. Could the yeast for over 15 years lead to adrenal fatigue? It definitely can contribute, yes. Misty's having an ongoing rash on her arms and is spreading to my face is actually a really good point. A lot of the skin, like mysterious skin conditions that are happening can also be due to Candida. So thank you for bringing this up. Water kefir helps control. No, it doesn't actually. I'm going to talk about dietary changes in a second. And actually, there's a big battle over to do fermented foods and not to do fermented foods when you're having Candida. And so I'll tell you, when I talk about diet, I'll give you my take on it. Water kefir, I'm not a fan of Gianna, because you're starting off with sugar. The water kefir grains are eating the sugar, converting into probiotics. But in order to completely get rid of the sugar, it would need to turn into like almost a vinegar tasting drink, which you're not going to drink. So in order to make it still palatable, there's still sugar. And when you're doing a Candida cleanse, I really recommend for the 4 weeks to completely get off sugar to kill off the bugs or the yeast. Any homeopathy solutions work with this? I don't know enough about homeopathy. My intuition is that I think it's a really nice tool. If I were you, I'll bring it in as a tool to help boost up the immune system, to help kill off Candida. But if you do not modify your diet and you're constantly feeding the yeast, I'm not sure what homeopathy alone can do for that. My common sense would tell me it would not. That itself is not going to help. So let me tell you what causes Candida, because sometimes when you know causation, then you can also talk about elimination of the causes, right? You guys, I think the biggest thing that's been happening is the use of antibiotics. Many of us have been put on rounds of antibiotics as kids, whether it's starting off with all sorts of infections we had, and then as young girls having UTIs, having yeast infections in the ears. I certainly had for a lot of sinus infections, and then I had constant UTIs, was put on rounds of antibiotics. We just didn't know about all those things back then. And, I think unless your parents were hippies, which mine were not, you just trust the doctor, right? And so think about it from the time you were born. And that's another thing I just want to share with you, is that if you were not a breastfed baby, you tend to be low on the bifidobacterium range of probiotics and bacteria, right? And so we tend to be naturally more prone to yeast infections. I certainly wasn't breastfed. In fact, in the first month of my life, I was already at a hospital with antibiotics for a pneumonia that I got. Already in the first month, they put me on antibiotics. So you can imagine, like, mom didn't breastfeed me. First month, already antibiotics. And so it was, I've always had digestive issues, period. And I need to work really hard to keep a healthy gut. So just to be cautious of that kind of history. Obviously your diet plays a huge role. I mean, if you grew up on cereal and then lunch was bread, sandwich, and dinner was pasta, right? Carbs, processed carbs, sugar addiction. I mean, we live in America. I always talk about it, that one of the biggest shockers I had when I moved to the United States was how much sugar there was in everything all the time, and how sweet everything tasted. And then I would complain about it, and people go like, no, but that's the way the frappe is supposed to taste. Or no, that's how the, smoothie is supposed to taste. You're like, no, it's way too sweet. But people are so used to sugar here, you don't even realize that. one of the things that I do in my cooking program is we go through an exercise of actually reading product labels and discovering how much sugar there is. And I can't tell you how many people had a huge aha moment going like, oh my God, I never thought there would be so much sugar in my food. So one of the things I encourage you to do on your own today is go back to your pantry, look at your bars, all your sports bars, your nut bars, etc. Look at your cereal boxes. You shouldn't be eating cereal for breakfast anyway, but check it. Look at the juices you're drinking, right? You know, like sometimes a small little juice like that, right? You know, you look at the label and it's got like 28 grams of sugar. 28 grams, you divide it by 4, right? So what's that? Like 8-9 teaspoons of sugar in just a little, you know, in just a little, like an 8-ounce container, right? So it's everywhere. And when you combine it all together, you're suddenly finding yourself with 20-30 teaspoons of sugar a day. So past history of birth control pills can be contributing. Birth control pills now we know changes the microbiome so much so that depletes us of the good bacteria. And you know, sometimes it's not just about killing the Candida, but it's also bringing in other probiotics and good bacteria that keep it in check, like police, you know? And that's what a lot of times we are deprived of. Birth control pills change the microbiome, deplete us of good bacteria. Yeast then have a field, have a party. Digestive issues like SIBO and parasites can also be contributing to that. Compromised immune system. So, for example, stress. Some of you have mentioned here you have adrenal fatigue. It's a little bit of you know, chicken and egg situation. But start noticing when you are stressed out, does the Candida come up? Does it flare up for you? A lot of people report that is the case. Could be many reasons. One of it is that when adrenals go up, produce more cortisol, you're killing progesterone, and then estrogen goes up higher. Estrogen promotes Candida growth. That could be one. When you're stressed out, you're also changing the pH of the body. Candida loves to live in an acidic body environment, right? So stress and having a suppressed immune system, you know, also the immune system's job is to kill Candida. So what I'm just saying in simple terms is that stress can also be facilitating Candida flare-up. Another one, which is a huge one, and that's something I've been battling with for a long time. In fact, I'm going to start a new protocol in heavy metal detox. I hope this time around it works, because it didn't work the last time, the last two I did, is the presence of heavy metals, mercury, lead, thallium, you know, whatever it is, and getting tested through blood and urine is really good to determine if you have high levels. If you do have high levels of mercury and all these heavy metals, you're never going to be able to get rid of Candida. And the reason is the Candida, the body is so smart that it will create a Candida film in the intestines to protect the heavy metals from escaping their small intestine, getting into the bloodstream, and penetrating your brain. And so anyone knows, you know, like the saying, mad as a hatter, right? So you're talking about inhaling any form of toxins go straight into your brain. That will, you know, it does tremendous damage. So the body uses Candida as a form of protection. In other words, you're gonna get rid of heavy metals first before if you have chronic Candida. I'm not saying everybody has a problem with heavy metals, you know, and my recommendation would be for you to try a anti-Candida diet first, and then only if you're not clearing it becomes chronic and it returns really quickly, then you've got to look at those other two factors. Heavy metals is one, and the other one is presence of parasites. Parasites can suppress the immune system, so much so that the immune system is completely incapable of clearing Candida. I hope I'm not giving you like too much information here in one go. Let me just take a quick look at your questions. Miriam is saying, my daughter's similar background to yours. She was abandoned in the street at birth. Okay, that was not me, but okay. She was 2 kg. She was very sick when I saw her at 2 weeks. The doctor in East Africa had her in very intense antibiotics. She's been suffering her whole life. Yeah, she's really changed her diet. We have tried just about everything. You know, Miriam, we always say that we've tried about everything. You've tried everything within your paradigm. If it's a complex case, I would suggest to working with really good naturopath, you know, or integrative doctor who can really look at. I don't think you've tried everything yet. So there's always something we don't know about. I could say the same thing 6 months ago. I've tried everything and I still had problem with oxalates, Turns out a month ago I discovered that I had SIBO, which went completely undiagnosed. And so with that treatment, I've completely recovered. And so my gut is fixed. We're going on to the next level of eliminating the heavy metals. So Don't limit yourself by saying we've tried everything, because it's a very limiting belief. Say that we've tried already a lot and search for more, because there will be answers to that. She's been seeing an integrative doctor for 2 years. Okay, maybe he ran out of, not every integrative doctor is the same, right? Have you worked with a lawyer who told you one thing? You go to another lawyer and he's like, no, we can take a totally different approach. And that's exactly how this could work. Terry is saying, you mentioned skin problems. Do you think Candida could also be caused by many carcinogens all over, cause of many keratises all over my body? I don't know what that is. Charlene is saying, great information. Please continue. Okay, yes, I will. Just a second. Is the Nuva ring better than taking birth control pills? Jessica is asking. Great question. I would say it's like the best of the worst. It will, but you're right that it bypasses so it's not gonna mess up with your digestion, but it has other issues. You're still giving your body synthetic hormones. That's another story altogether. So. Okay, so let me keep going with the Candida story and see what else I have here for you. I want to let's talk about diagnosis, because that's a really good one, and I want to show you a simple test you can do with a glass of water at home. But before that, so, like I said earlier, a lot of people come back and say, hey, Magdalena, I kind of, like you said, Candida, but I've tried it. I mean, I've done tests, my doctor done a test, and it shows negative. If the symptoms that I mentioned at the beginning of the call really resonate with you, you're like, yes, maybe no, yes, right? Then listen to your body. Don't ever shut down what your symptoms are. Don't listen, allow yourself, open yourself up to the possibility that could be Candida, even though the tests don't show you that. The standard test a lot of conventional doctors run is for blood. It's an antibodies, IgG, IgM, and IgE antibodies that are tested for Candida. Honestly, like when I had a raging case of Candida, I had all of those to come back negative. And I've seen this too many times to actually tell you that I feel like blood is completely useless. The little bit more reliable ones would be stool tests. And so there are some good tests in the market, like Doctor's Data is a good one. The GI map I talked about before is a pretty good one. Cyrax Array 12, Cyrax CYRAX, but you've got to work with somebody who has an account with Cyrax. Cyrax is amazing. They use a totally different technology. It's probably the most reliable lab test in the market. They have antibodies for Candida. So that's the one I would recommend doing. And and I have to tell you, it can be a hit and miss. None of those tests you can order yourself. You have to go through a doctor. All of these tests are, actually, sorry, I take it back. Doctor's Data, you can order that yourself on directlabs.com, unless you live in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, like the East Coast corner there. Yeah, GI Map and Cyrax Array 12, you need to order through a doctor. My favorite is definitely Cyrax Array 12, and it's also the only one that has showed Candida in my case. But I want to show you a test that is so simple, and a lot of practitioners poo-poo on it. But, I have no reason to say yay or nay, unless I know it works, and I feel like it's worked for so many people I've worked with, that it's worth trying, and it's totally free, easy, quick. So this is what you do. It's called the spit test. And what you do is you put a glass of water or a jar of water, it doesn't really matter, by your bedtime tonight. And tomorrow morning as you wake up, before you drink, eat anything, or brush your teeth, you build up a bowl of spit in your mouth. And first thing in the morning, lean over and just spit in this glass of water, right? And what would happen is, without shaking it, so you don't want to lift it, you don't want to move it, you just put it on the table, right, on your nightstand, and set a timer for 20 minutes and see what happens. And there are 3 possibilities that will happen with a saliva test. The first one is that you just see the saliva just floating on top and nothing happens. And that's really what you want. I remember, my partner at that time did that with me, and his just remained on top for the full 20 minutes, never went anywhere. And that's exactly what you want. That rules out Candida. The second one is, and also, sorry, I forgot one more thing. Do not eat dairy the night before or the day before, right? So that's one thing you want to also avoid, which I hope you do avoid dairy altogether. So the second possibility that will happen is it starts floating at the beginning on top here, right? But then it starts developing these tentacles, right? These strings that start going down the glass. That's a sign that there is a presence of yeast. The worst one is that, and you also want to time it, and like, you don't have to sit there for 20 minutes, just set a timer every 5 minutes just to observe, see what happens. The worst one is when it plunges right to the bottom. You know, it goes right to the bottom and you just see like this blob floating, not floating, it's like right at the bottom of the glass, right? So you want to do transparent, you don't want to do like a mug, right? You can't see what's going on. You know, and I have to tell you, I've had women who did the Candida cleanse, who did it before and after, and it really works. And so yeah, so inexpensive, you can rule out, if you have this combination of the symptoms I talked about, you have a glass of wine, you get that stuffy thing, you get the itchy nose, you get white tongue the next morning, right? You get vaginal discharges, right? All the symptoms I talked about. And then you combine it with this test. I would strongly recommend for you to do the Candida cleanse and protocol and get on it. You got nothing to lose. You can only start feeling better. And with typically, within a couple of weeks, you start seeing some really great results. Let me take a look at your questions here. So Brenda is saying, I've been following strict Candida cleanse and diet for 2 months, starting to see change. Highly recommend being a holistic nutritionist. Yeah, highly recommend seeing a holistic nutritionist. Awesome, that's great. Thank you, Brenda. She's saying I'm sharing excellent information. Okay, Julian's saying diagnosed with fibro, but now found that Lyme disease, co-infection. Do antibiotics already gave me yeast infection, so taking probiotics and oregano oil. What can I do? Sherry's saying she's missed the test. Hey Sherry, I'm not going to repeat, but we do have a replay on this on my website. If you go to hormonesbalance.com, there's going to be a replay posted hopefully tomorrow or on Tuesday or something like that. Let me talk about the diet changes now, right? So what can you do to help yourself? And, the key changes that I recommend making when it comes to when you have Candida, when this really resonates with you, either do the test, like if you really need to prove it to yourself, or just try it out. Now, I have to tell you guys, I am never about deprivation, never. Like even my cookbook is all about, okay, we cut out certain foods, but then we bring all of these other foods in, right? So that you really start shifting you to possibilities and opening up new doors. Just because we shut down 2 doors, 3 doors, it doesn't really matter because we've just opened up 10 other doors. So Candida is the only exception, I would say, to my approach, only exception, where you do really want to be restricted. And it's the kind of thing, if you do it well, you do it once and it's gonna benefit you for years to come. But it is a fairly restricted diet. So I recommend to do for first 4 weeks a highly restricted diet of no grains, no legumes, no starchy vegetables, so like no potatoes, no sweet potatoes, no root vegetables, right? No beets, no celery, celery root, parsnips and that kind of stuff. No dairy, of course, no gluten, right? That's a given, I think. But also, there's a big debate in the holistic nutrition world, do we do fermented foods when you have Candida? Like, for example, Donna Gates is a big proponent of doing not water kefir, somebody asked about that, but more vegetable-based fermented vegetables, right? Do you do that or do you not do that? And I'm going to take a sip of water because I've been talking too much. Somebody's asking about stevia. Stevia is fine. But I want to talk, can you just remind me in a second, I'll tell you something about stevia. So somebody's asking, so what can you eat? You can eat all the protein, you can eat all the fish, meat, vegetables such as, all the green leafy vegetables, you can do nuts and seeds, right? You can do, you don't do fruit for the first 4 weeks. At the most, you want to do a handful of berries, so very low glycemic index, and maybe half a green apple a day. That's your maximum in the first 4 weeks. For best effect, and by the way, hey you guys, so I'm sharing a lot of information here today. I actually have a full program like with meal plans, with the foods that are lined up, with the whole RX and supplements for chronic Candida treatment as well. That's given away as a bonus. If you're interested, do the cookingforbalance.com free workshop. Decide if this is for you. There's a whole module on Candida with the meal plan, with the food lists, And with the whole list of supplements, when, how, when to do RX, when to do the supplements, when to do, and how to incorporate the diet changes as well. Also, how to test for different heavy metals if the Candida isn't going away. So I want to just give you the overall, the bigger picture here for now. The supplements that is really great to use is things like, you know, somebody mentioned olive oregano, but again, sometimes it's the nuance is in the detail, right? The difference is in the detail, and olive oregano itself is fine, but it's also in different forms. So for example, the one that I really like using is called enteric with enteric coating. That's the one that bypasses your digestion, goes into the intestines. So then grapefruit seed extract is another really great one. Darko, caprylic acid, you know, berberine are some of the really great supplements that I'm a big fan of bringing that into your change as well. So it's a two-way approach of, on one hand, stop feeding the Candida. On the other hand, put in the soldiers in there to kill the Candida, right? And then nurture your body, boost your immune system, having its own ability of killing these little buggers, because they really are buggers. It's a hugely opportunistic, and they come back really quickly if you don't kill them properly. But also bringing in really good kind of probiotics in. Remember I talked about at the beginning that Candida has a party when there is no, it's like, you know, these crazy teenage kids who are having like these crazy parties when the parents are out of the house, right? So you want to kind of bring in the parents to kind of still have the party, but observe what's going on. So bringing in those parents is bringing in the good bacteria. And so it really is that three-pronged approach. Stop feeding, kill it, and then support the immune system with good probiotics. There's also RXs. Somebody mentioned about nystatin, I think was the question. Again, nystatin it's an RX. It's okay to use it like if you really have a chronic one. You know, it's a good one to bring in. But interestingly, nystatin, ironically, is the prescription, the ready-made one, contains sugar, which is crazy. So you want to talk to your doctor if you go in the nystatin direction. Talk to the doctor about having it formulated, custom-made, without the sugar. It tastes awful, but you know it's just gonna be a pretty unpleasant 4 weeks. You want to do this before summer. If you're doing it, not like please don't do a Candida cleanse when you're going on a holiday, because you're gonna like shoot yourself. It's just not pleasant for you. It's not pleasant for people to be around, because people do have die-off effects, I have to tell you, which is a good thing, right? When you have Candida, because you're like, yes, something is happening. Like these guys are just dying off, and all my symptoms are gonna get better. So another one is fluconazole, is another form of medication. You're gonna talk to your doctor the pros and cons for both of them. So that's the super restricted diet for the first 4 weeks. And then you go on to another 4 weeks, what I call the introductory diet, Candida diet, which is slowly bringing in the legumes, slowly bringing in the non-gluten grains, slowly bringing in fermented vegetables, fermented vegetables, and not like water kefirs again, because that's still sugar. No kombucha, please. But things like sauerkraut, kimchi, right? You know, and that really can help a lot with, Yolanda is saying, don't take medication. Yeah, well, it depends on what you're taking. If it's a medication that's necessary, then you're going to talk to your doctor about that. So we don't want to be advising people on medication, because that can be really sensitive. That's a decision that only a doctor should be advising on. So that's that's really how I would approach it. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, because you probably know me by now. I'm very transparent about my health. I was diagnosed with, even though I was testing negative for SIBO, I was diagnosed with, actually my doctor said, as long as you're sensitive to FODMAPs, my case, onions and garlic, I was bloated and really reactive. She put me in a SIBO treatment, and I was on it for 6 weeks, and I'm just realizing now I can eat onion, garlic, oxalates again, and I'm not responding. So I think it looks like the SIBO has cleared. We are moving to the next level of the protocol, which is heavy metals before we treat Candida. You know, for all these years, I had like this Candida up and down, up and down. And the reason why I couldn't clear the heavy metals because I had SIBO. So can you see like the chain reaction here, right? It starts with the health of the gut, and then elimination of the heavy metals. If you don't clear the heavy metals, the Candida is never going to go away. So it's like peeling the onion. In my case, we're peeling the onion. I'm definitely a more complicated case than most people. Nutrition itself hasn't helped me. I've done a lot of different cleanses, my own thyroid detox, done it many times, and everybody is getting so well on it. And I was getting like some results, but not really clearing whatever was going on in my gut. And when you have SIBO, you can't just deal with it with a diet alone, right? So, removing the underlying causes can really be super, super helpful. Let me take a look. Dark organic chocolate is okay. Yolanda is saying, well, Yolanda is responding, is chocolate okay? And somebody's saying dark chocolate is okay. Well, it depends on how much sugar it has. So you want to look at the sugar content. During this time, one of the cool things in the Cooking for Balance program is that there are recipes that are labeled specifically for Candida. There aren't many of them, but there are some that are completely sugar-free. And like my favorite is a lime pudding. That's just so nice and creamy, and it's got lime in it, and it's just got that richness to it. It's super addictive and doesn't have any sugar. That's the kind of dessert you want. Chocolate will always have sugar unless you're buying sugar. That's like for the diabetics that uses, but then again, a lot of times they use alcohol sugar, like erythritol or other sugars, which I'm not a big fan of. Let's see, what else do we have here? Misty said, question I asked earlier was, which protocol do I start with? I'm pretty sure that I have Candida, having eczema. That's a great observation, Misty. A lot of times eczema goes away when we clear. I also have, when we clear Candida. I also have estrogen dominance, having ovarian cancer and fibroids. Could you give some direction, please? So, Misty, are you doing our Cooking for Balance program? Can you just share? Because I don't know. If you are, the basic thing is to do the elimination diet to really identify what are your food triggers. If you've been on this path for a long time and things still aren't healing really well, then what I would suggest is work with an integrative doctor to get like GI map done. Some Cyrex labs just to see what else is going on in your digestion. And then it really starts with the health of the gut first. So Misty's saying, no, not yet. I have no idea where to start. So, okay, so Misty, check out cookingforbalance.com. Lisa, my assistant, just posted and pinned the Cooking for Balance free workshop. Take a look at the workshop, decide from there if you want to do it. There's a whole big module on how to heal the digestion. And so I would recommend for you to start off with that, because estrogen dominance is not going to go away if your gut is messed up. Like what else did she mention that you had here? Ovarian cancer and fibroids. So that's huge estrogen dominance. And I talk about it, one of the things in the workshop, that estrogen dominance is largely caused by poor digestive health. There is something called the estrobolome, which metabolizes bad estrogens that are actually causing cancers, estrogenic cancer, fibroids, ovarian cysts, as well as ovarian cancers. Those are all estrogenic issues, and the liver is hugely important in estrogen dominance. So Misty, I would recommend to deal with your gut first, do the protocol that I have there, do the elimination diet. If you have any bacterial infections, work with a doctor and ruling those out. And you will see when you do that, a lot of the symptoms will start going away. And only then start working on the estrogen dominance protocol. I have a whole protocol on estrogen dominance. I hope that makes sense. Will there be a replay? I would love to rewatch, Shelly. Yes, there is going to be a replay of this call today. And on Facebook, we always leave the video on Facebook, but if you want to get on my website, you can see it probably tomorrow. It's going to be on hormonesbalance.com, my website, under Live Friday Q&As. I grew up very malnutrition, so this makes total sense. Thank you very much. You're very welcome, Misty. Okay, let's see what other questions have we got coming in. Misty, okay, that's Misty, so that we've covered that. I need to do a cleanse and I'm losing my hair and sweating, Dana is saying. So, Dana, one of the things that Dana Crummy is saying, I do a cleanse and I'm losing my hair. I need to do a cleanse. Yeah, so definitely these things can help. I mean, losing your hair, is more connected to, I did a whole call on loss of hair, so you might want to watch that. Go to hormonesbalance.com, look at the live Q&As, and look for the video on hair loss. There was so many reasons for hair loss. You might want to look at that and choose your cause. And sweating, a lot of times it's either when we are toxin, we start sweating a lot because it's a form of elimination. But also people with low estrogen levels can also be sweating buckets. And so that's another thing you might want to look into. do the Cooking for Balance the workshop first. Take a look at it because it really is helpful to give you a real sense of framework of what good hormonal balance is resting on. I call it three-legged stool. You know, to sit comfortably on a stool, you need to have all the three legs in place, because otherwise you're gonna be like wobbling and you fall off, right? And the three legs is your gut, liver, and sugar levels. So there you have it. All right, you guys. So I hope this call was helpful to you. I really hope that you look into doing something about Candida before summer starts. It's hard to do a Candida cleanse when you're on a summer holiday. Don't do that. Wait for after, you know, because then it's like no alcohol. I mean, I didn't mention that, but I hope you get that, right? No alcohol, alcohol is sugar. You know, all this restricted diet for 4 weeks is no fun. But I think June is a good time to do it before you go on a holiday. Okay, so I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I hope this was helpful for you, what you have learned today. And you know, most important thing is take action, because really that's what I'm doing these calls for, is to really motivate you to take some action and do something for yourself. A lot of times people settle at the knowing piece and not really the doing piece. And I'm a big doer, like do something to help yourself, whatever it might be. Even the smallest change. So start off with the workshop, watch that, get on the elimination diet, try it out. It's just gonna be so helpful in getting you started on that path. Okay, everyone, ciao for now, and I'll see you next week.